Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel, welcome to my overview of F1 24. So we've got a little bit to cover. I usually go on about a spiel, I cover these games for like 2 hours for an overview because it's the Steam refund window. I've put a bit more time into this, kind of needed to, because at the last end of my 2 hours, I was pretty ready to just write this off as not a fantastic game. And then I realized there was actually a lot more to the career mode than I realized. So I've put more time into it and I've done a bit of a 180 to be honest. I actually think I really like what's happening here, though it is a bit melancholic because they've pulled some stuff out as well. So the credentials would be, I'm a normie, okay? I'm fair weather. I don't have like a $10,000 super simulation rig thing. There are entire channels dedicated to that, right? However, if you are a bit of a normie, dare I say arcade racer, but you're thinking about dipping your toes, and it's intimidating, well, maybe I can offer insight. I've been covering these games as they come out each year, and I've quickly become a bit of a fan since I started covering them pretty much for this channel. So I'm still new-ish to the hobby, and I really like the F1 games. I like a lot of what Codemasters does. So I would argue I have fairly unique perspective, at least in the commentary surrounding these sort of games. For example, right, driving model, I don't know much about it. I use thumbsticks. I started on like the default high assist mode in this, but these days I very quickly work my way up to the next one, which is called experienced or something like that. So it's limited drive lines, but you know, the simulation starts to turn up a bit, and that's something I would recommend doing as soon as you quickly can with this game, because the default setting is so arcadey, probably the most arcadey it's ever been. And it seems that you get away with murder with regards to like close collisions and penalties and all that sort of stuff. So in a way, you know, I guess I'm trying to devil's advocate, but not necessarily carry water. In a way, on the basic settings mode, this is probably the most arcadey I've seen it being, which in and of itself probably would appeal to a wider audience. And I feel like the strategy of these F1 games over the years, all the modes that they try, many of which I like because I am the normie wider audience that they're trying to attract, it feels like that's kind of their strategy. They've already got the sim races hook, line, and sinker, and they're going to tear themselves apart about the little, you know, differences over time. But that's what it feels like, and that's not disparagement or anything like that. I feel like if you're a hardcore sim racer, you probably follow this game very closely, whether you like it or like to hate it. So yeah, really arcadey, very accessible, I would say, but kind of infuriating to drive. On the straights, it flogs around like a little go-kart, but once you turn it up, it was good. You know, I was starting to lock up my brakes if I wasn't feathering the pedals properly, and it felt good. It went from feeling like Mario Kart to feeling good going up in assists. One thing also worth mentioning, I wasn't really going to talk about drive model, but I'll talk about it because it's my weakest part. What an idiot like me, a monkey with a controller, notices that's changed. And one thing is you have F1 and F2. You have that through lots of modes, and the main career mode, which is the sort of the party trick gimmick this time around, you can start in F2 mode, or you can go into F1. And there is something going on. They've changed the F1 model where there is a lot of understeer. And at first I had an almost repulsive reaction to it, but I'm warming up to it. I'm getting better at it. It's actually kind of making you drive, dare I say, like you were driving a bit of a muscle car or something like that, something very rear wheel drive and heavy. So I feel like you got to be a bit more considered about feathering your brakes into turns. You can't stand on the brake because you'll lock up, but the understeer as well, you really have to kind of think a split second further ahead than what I'm used to counter the understeer. Now, the reason why I'm sort of not just overly condemning it is because the F2 seems to almost have the same drive model that I'm comfortable with from previous games. So the F2 doesn't seem to have that understeer, and it goes much slower as well. So that's interesting. To me, I see intent there, right? It's not like the model's broken. I wouldn't say that, because if it was, F2 would have the same problem. So it almost feels like to get on a meta gameplay design level, it feels like they're using the old drive model, or at least aspects of it, in the F2, and whatever it is they're trying to go for this year, this sort of more considered, arguably a bit more punishing model is in the F1. So look, that's all I've really got to say on the driving model. Apart from, you know, I turn it up to experience, and racing in the F1s, it's growing on me. It feels like it's got another thing to consider that it didn't really have before. As far as modes go, now look, I was really miffed, and to front load, you could argue I played it wrong, but the game didn't really telegraph otherwise. Now, I think other guys have obviously got it ahead of release as well. It's not just me. The kind of people that are going to actually play this game ahead ahead of release probably have a deeper investment and interest than a normie sort of player, I suppose. So in the career mode, it options you to start at F2 for a preliminary development season. And it even says, I think the text is like, skip to F1, right? So the telegraphing around it, I think, is to its detriment because the F2 mode is really dumbed down and very stripped back. So I've started with F2 because why wouldn't you? All the telegraphing leads to it. And my point being that most people probably looking at the game now, they're probably starting with F2 and getting the same negative feeling from the career mode in that you have like an RPG character sheet, you have some stats, they seem to go up and down depending on your performance on the race, and it's very much encapsulating the format from the previous kind of story modes, which is sadly absent this time around, where it's more vignette-like, right? So you do a flying lap qualifying, no practice or anything like that, and then you go out and do like a feature race, they call it, which is 5 laps or something, right? And I jumped the starting gun and took a drive-through penalty just out of curiosity, and that's it. It fucked me for the race because you've only got 5 laps to get back in front. But like, that was it. That was the loop. And then I was like, okay, cool. So that's the new mode. It's kind of paper thin. They've taken out the story mode, which hurts my soul so much. I love when EA does these weird, stupid, cheesy, almost like Call of Duty campaigns, but in an F1 or a sports game. They did one for FIFA. I played FIFA because of that stupid bloody mode. And then, I don't know, it was called like Slingshot or some crap. Madden, they did it originally. That's when I played them. So yeah, I miss the kind of drama bullshit cheese from those campaigns. Old Devin Butler doesn't seem to be in this game, and it hurts me. I thought, okay, well, if you're going to take that out and you're going to put this new career mode in, what's it like? And I was just filthy. Because the other modes that are in there, you've got multiplayer and all that, which I don't really go into. You've still got the My Team, which from what I understand is almost identical to the previous My Teams. That's not a bad thing at all, but it's become expected. And funnily enough, as someone who's only just covered these in the last years, I remember when they introduced it and I was like, this is fucking cool. And it is. It's all RPG and like management, and you manage all your aerodynamics and all that sort of parts of ship in R&D and contracts, and then they make practice mode actually fun because you go out and you do little mini missions to help the R&D department and all that, and arguably the practice and qualifying is just as fun, if not more, than the actual race day. So that's all still in there and unchanged. And then they've got the bloody World of Warcraft version that they added in last year. I can't remember what it's called, World of F1 or some crap, where essentially you do races and it's like gear-based, right? It's like a looter shooter, but F1. And I didn't spend a lot of time in it, but it's cool. It seems pretty cool, right? You contract middle-aged men in suits with different rarity levels. It's so fucking strange, but it's got its appeal. It's very charming. But then I thought that's all this package was. They took out the story, they put in a really shit RPG mission and kept in stuff as expected. So I was quite furious and ready to throw the control. But then I thought on a whim, what if I just skip to F1? If I skip the F2 preamble season altogether, I just on a whim gave that a go, and then I realized that the career mode is actually very, very deep and doing some really crazy stuff. It's got a lot of My Team in it, so like R&D things, but instead of focusing on the team level, you can play as an existing F1 racer. I chose Bottas because of his rude fucking head. But you can make your own custom dude, and presumably you can level up your kind of low-level F2 dude in the pre-season to push him up into F1, and that whole package would be fun. But what I'm getting at long last, is that the context is missing. I think a lot of people will jump in, especially in the refund window, and they'll play that F2 and go, this is shit, because it kind of is. Like, it's kind of unacceptable if that was the game mode replacing the blockbuster cheesy story, when the F1 mode is actually how you're supposed to play it. So you sign a contract, you have your, like, I think my overall score for Bottas was 81. And you set the contract goal to say, this is what my overall is going to be at the end of the season. So you have seasonal goals on this individual driver RPG stat sheet system, which is cool. I've never really seen anything like that in other game. So I set it for like 85. And if you drop below 78, you'll lose your seat. And you essentially, now obviously I've only played it for a little bit, you take these vignette type race modes and you power through seasons, and you have I can't remember what it's called, but it's like goodwill. It's like an influence. It's this intangible thing between you and your co-driver. So there's this rivalry that they're kind of picking up, but more mechanically than story-based from the previous modes. So you and your co-driver have essentially how much you are favoured on a sliding scale versing each other by the actual R&D teams and the race team altogether. So you're sort of trying to play favourite step kid to get more benefits and more bonuses from the company. And you also have your influence with other teams and what they think about you and your performance. So it actually gets really quite deep and interesting. And then when you go into, the race days and all that, you can actually unlock and play the practice modes and all that as well, which was missing in the F2. So essentially the F2 is an ultra dumbed down tutorial version of it, but the game doesn't really make it clear that that's kind of not how you're supposed to play it unless you're a really hardcore player that's willing to put in a couple of hours of the prequel mode. But I really like it. I like the My Career mode. I'm still a bit filthy that they took the story out, though the story was going a little bit weird last game. We're not even going to get into that. And if I were to speculate, I wonder if they're gearing up to phase out the My Team mode whole cloth, because this My Career thing, while it's doing some interesting stuff and making it more RPG, and there are some little cutscenes where they put the likeness in there and it doesn't, they don't talk or anything like that. They don't have voice lines, but where you're talking to your bloody agent and all that. But I really do feel like maybe they're gearing up to scrap My Team and push My Career, the more single racer RPG thing, and maybe they bring the story back in a dynamic way or something. But this is all just heavy speculation. Do I recommend it? Well, even at this low level, it's very difficult to say. What I would definitely at least recommend when they started putting all this stuff in, God, it was probably like F1 19 or 20 or something like that. Get a feel probably on the cheap for if this is your sort of thing. Because at this point, they're tweaking race models and they're pulling out modes and putting new modes in. Like, it feels very test bed. From that alone, it's less of maybe this should be your first F1 game, and more if you're already a big fan, it's almost like tracking the attempts to find its new identity. So it's not necessarily bad, but it's definitely missing stuff. It's put some other stuff in. The other stuff it's put in seems to have some depth. But yeah, a lot better than how I felt in the initial hour and a half or whatever. I was kind of like, wow, you're going to charge the same price for a game that's missing quarter of the content. So at least it won me back, I suppose. Anyway, that's my thoughts as an absolute casual normie, whatever you want to bloody call me. I like it, but I like all of these games because they're squarely aimed at me. At least the innovation that they bring, they're aimed at normies that are trying to get into it. Anyway, team, I might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.